Is the timer right? They're going to give me half an hour? Okay, so pleasure being here. This is a very interesting topic, and I think it's becoming very, very relevant as time goes by and as more companies use data. I'm just gonna go very fast through a topic that we could probably spend like 3 days talking about this. But I just want to give a brief touches on the topic. So, there we go. So I'm a computer scientist. This is something that not many people actually know. Most people know me for writing for TechEU or for doing events or for doing mentoring, but I'm actually a computer scientist. So when I went to school, we had this horrible subject, which was databases. And it was essentially relational databases. This was circa 2004. It was already late, if you ask me, okay? There were a lot of things happening in 2004, apart from the traveling through the desert after the bubble burst. But we were already generating a lot of data. The internet was growing really healthily. And it's surprising that still in most schools, you were just getting this relational databases stuff. And then, let's say the internet happened. Okay, and so what essentially happened is that the amount of traffic and data generated on the internet just freaking exploded. Okay, exploded to a point, these are petabytes per month, okay, per month. I think yesterday we had someone from a telco company saying, we basically manage 1.7 petabytes on a year, okay, this is per month. Now, this has created a lot of fucked up structures, okay, or problems. Probably the most important one is the problem of noise. It's really, really hard to get any signal from what we're doing in our day-to-day lives. I know, so we had the question before, how many people here use Twitter nearly on a daily basis? Okay? How many people try or attempt to read their Twitter stream on a daily basis? There's still some naive people that think they can read their Twitter streams. You know, after a while, you realize that it's impossible, okay? The amount of tweets. Every time someone tells me, no, I read my Twitter feed, I go like, yeah, you have 3 friends, haven't you? You go like, yeah, how do you know that? It's like, yeah, no, just guessing, okay? So my point is, it's really, really hard right now to extract signal from the amount of noise that is being generated on the internet. And the problem is, before you could actually get a table of numbers of data and try to figure out what were you doing and try to skim through it. I recently had this conversation with my father-in-law, and he said, oh, no, but we're engineers. We just get a table with, like, you know, the information, and we don't need any charts. We don't need any visualization. Just with the table, we can do that. I was asking him, so how many records does your table has? He's like, well, normally we manage between 10 to 20. And I was like, okay, do you know how to do that with terabytes of entries on a table? And he was like, well, what is that? It's like, okay, that's a problem, okay? Now, so try to getting some information out of something like this. Right now, it's impossible. You're not going to be able to do that. Now, most people will get blocked, okay? You'll get a blue screen of death. It's like, oh, okay, so how do we extract information from this stuff? There's too much data. Now, the thing about we humans is that we are visual creatures. So despite all that we try to do, we try to cater a lot of our information through the rational brain. And this is a big mistake, because no matter how business-like we think we are, no matter how professional we think we are, we still get fucked by a rational brain, by an irrational brain or emotional brain, every single time. Now, part of this means that we are visual creatures. We react very vividly to visual images. So how do humans actually solve the problem of extensive data and not being able to cope with it? Well, mostly through data visualization, okay? So there's many ways to visualize data. For those of you that were here yesterday morning, the talk by Dave Troy over there, always working on his laptop, was extraordinary in the way he uses data visualization to explain things. Now, the problem with data visualization is that you assume that people know how to do a visualization. That's a big if, okay? This is an image, and I believe you cannot read it, which is even better, that says something like, do I need an infographic? And it's self-explanatory if you can see it. It's very helpful to have this kind of visualization to learn how to do this. And this is the case for most visualizations. They're very badly done. They don't resolve the problem. But if you keep going with me here, just let's assume that people know how to do a good visualization, which is, again, a big if. The major problem is that you're still dealing with data. Okay, even if you do a good visualization, you're still showing data. Even if it's a structured way, and even if it's less amount of data, okay, it's still data. Now, I want to get the definition of what data was. Okay, this is from the Merriam-Webster. So data is a factual information as measurements or statistics used as a basis for reasoning, discussions, or calculations. Basis of reasoning and discussion. That's the definition of data. Second definition of data, information output by a sensing device or organ that includes both useful and irrelevant or redundant information and must be processed to be meaningful. Okay, the whole point in both definitions is that it needs to be processed somehow, and it needs to be interpreted somehow. Now, these are wonderful infographics that you can find on the internet. They're so freaking useful. I mean, people still think that the fact that you put something on Photoshop or Illustrator makes this as a good infographic. And this is so helpful, you know? No, you couldn't have just put 4 bullet points. You had to put that, I don't even know what that is. Looks like an ugly eye or something like that. But of course, I mean, you have different variations of this. It's like, yes, this is so useful. Yeah, I don't even know what the hell I'm looking. Okay? So the point with this, what I want to say is that even if you do visualization, there's still the extra mile, the last mile, which is even assuming and supposing that we're good at infographics and visualization, no one or very few people actually take the last mile, which is connecting that data, connecting that signal with a meaningful explanation of what the hell are we looking at. Now, this is where storytelling is extremely powerful when it comes to data. And the problem with storytelling is that most people, when you talk about storytelling, they figure this is what you're talking about. Okay, they're going to tell me, you know, the Cinderella thing. So, no, thank you. We're a serious business. So essentially, we're using very serious data. We don't want this guy to actually talk to a board and talk about our data, okay? Now, this is a big misconception. There's a lot of people that do storytelling, and you don't need to tell a, you know, children's tale. There's different ways of doing storytelling. But just to give you an example, he's a storyteller. There are many people that are storytellers, okay? Many of you have been experienced listening to Steve Jobs and many other thought leaders. They're very good at storytelling and blending it with data. Now, what story does is actually weaves meaning into the data, okay? So essentially, you have this disconnected points of data. You're filtering them out, you get the signal, but you still need to weave them together to make a coherent picture of what are you talking about. People still believe that the fact that you just put a graph or a chart on a PowerPoint or a keynote, that's enough. And truth is that that's not enough. Now, how many times you see these infographics being shared on Facebook and on Twitter? And everyone gives, I like. It looks fancy. I like. Now, if I ask you, when was the last time you actually saw one, except the ones that Dave showed yesterday, that was actually useful, that you would actually extract valuable information out of them? I'm pretty sure not that many times, okay? Now, so what is a story? I mean, and we could go deep into what a story is, because everyone talks about story, but it's hard to get to the actual core definition. But just so you get a broad idea of what a story is a sequence of action-reaction things. So it's a chain of action-reaction things that happen to someone, okay? So the larger the action-reaction chains, the better the story. The more conflict within that sequence of action-reaction, the better the story is going to be. Now, where does data fit within this picture? So essentially, this is the story realm, also known as if this, then that, okay? If my protagonist, if my character of the story does this, or if my company does this, or if my product does this, then this happens. So if our data is saying this, then this happens, okay? Now, where does visualization comes within this picture is that each of those points, each of those scenes is data. Now, you have to filter them through visualization to actually extract meaningful information, what we're going to call facts. The problem is that most people will only do the fact part. So you have this sequence of facts, fact, 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 fact. And while that's okay, and it appeals to a rational brain, very few people will actually remember that. And the key word here is remember. The best way to remember something is always through a story. So story is actually what glues all these facts together. Is what actually gets these visualizations and brings them up to life. And actually allow people to remember what the data was about. So, because I have few time to actually talk about this, I'm going to give you 4 or 5 tips about how to do this. I think the single most important question you need to ask yourself before you ever do anything around this space is, what do we want to know? You don't start with data. People get this wrong. People go like, I talk to so many companies that they tell you, oh, but we have 1,000 metrics. So we have the data. It's like, that's fine, and what are you doing with it? We have the data. No, but what are you doing with it? It's there. You can see it. It's like, yeah, thank you very much. But if it's sitting on a freaking database and no one is using it, what's the whole point of actually recollecting that data? So before you even start attempting to recollect data, the big question is, what do you want to answer? There's so many people, well, I won't say so many people, but it's already hard to find data specialists. It's hard to find mathematicians, people don't know about statistics, but there are. They're very smart people. Now, the hardest question is getting the vision on what to do with that data. So the first question before doing anything else is, what do we want to answer? Now, once we have that question answered, then we can go through the beaver hole. Okay, so I was inspired by Dave's talk yesterday. So I went to Twitter and I started gathering data about Justin Bieber. It's a fascinating stream, by the way. It's I don't have words to describe all the pictures I saw there. So you can just go and check later on. And I'm starting to understand why there's so many fans. Okay, but you start getting the data. Now, once I have the data, I need to extract the signal out of it. And then I also took another of the graphs that Dave showed yesterday, because I found it very, very interesting what he did. This is not just a visualization. He did something that is essentially what I'm talking about, which is, hey, I extracted I removed the noise, I created the signal, but now I need to interpret this. And it's not enough with just putting the labels on top of it. He did a great job at basically narrating what was going on there. I don't know if you, for me it was fascinating yesterday because it was like listening to a storyteller. He was telling you the story of Baltimore, what's happening here, and this is me, and that's my friend, and I'm on that corner, and this is how we interact with this guy, and this is what happened, and I'm not a big fan of hip-hop. Are you a fan of hip-hop? Nearly there, nearly there.
See on the graph, not so much.
So we remove the noise, we create the visualization, and then we bridge to the conclusion. Now, this is something I keep talking with a lot of people about storytelling. Storytelling is about talking to a 5-year-old. Most people assume that the audience knows everything, but this is not true. Best communication, the best stories are like if you were telling them to a 5-year-old. So you need to bring people by the hand. What's the problem? The major problem is that for a lot of experts, because they are the experts, they think that just for the fact that I show you a chart, you know what you're seeing. Oh, of course, everyone understands. Just let me go back. Of course, everyone understands this chart. It looks like America, actually. Sans Florida. Okay? So yeah, this is actually an image of the US. Actually, it's not. So my point is, if you're an expert, it's hard sometimes to isolate your brain from understanding that you need to walk people through this. So it's extremely important that you get this picture ingrained in your brain, that you need to walk people through your visualization, through your data. Connect this. Connect to the conclusion. If you don't do that, there's no story. There's just a sequence of facts. Okay? So even though the timer is down. I think I'm kind of out of time. So this is another example. This is a graph we have from one of my companies. It's called Venture Watch. This is a sequence of investment state in Spain based on the kind of segment of investment. So we have friends, fools, and family. Then we have seed. Then we have Series A, Series B, Series C, Series D. And the very light blue is 2012. And you can see how there was like not that much money, at least in the first stages. And then the two others is 2013, 2014. The dark one is 2014. The lighter one is 2013. The dark one is 2014. Now, if I don't tell you anything else, you see this chart and you go like, yeah, interesting. I mean, I see it. Kind of interesting. Now, the story behind this is we got a VC asking us, can you actually plot the state of investment right now? In which stage is most people investing? Because we're raising a new fund, and we're debating in which stage should we start investing. So we want to start investing in that stage where there's a stage crunch, when there's not that many people. And surprisingly, what we saw was that actually the rounds were moving towards bigger rounds. So while investment in seed was being maintained more or less, we were seeing an increase on Series C, Series D, Series B rounds, okay, compared to last year. Now, my point is, you need to tell a story around this. Just for the fact that I show you a graph, you're not going to get the information. You might extract a little bit out of it, but you need someone walking you through this, okay? So remember, key points about data visualization, okay? There's a problem with noise. It's extremely problematic, and it's becoming more and more problematic as time goes by. Ask yourself, what do we want to tell? What's the story we want to tell? Because that's going to be your guide within that big forest of data that we're living in. Now remember, visualization is a tool to remove noise. It's not the actual story. It could be, but it's not the actual story. So make sure you understand what's the role of visualization within the storyline. And then create the story and walk people through the data that you're showing. Some people ask me, is it possible to tell a story with data? It's always possible. I can talk to you about data, but then I can tell you about how that data affected someone's business, or how that data affected in the money-raising process of a company, okay? So 4 tips. I hope it was useful. 15 minutes for a Spaniard is not enough. Okay, so I hope at least you enjoyed it. Thank you very much, and here you have my data.